Stage 1, the number before the number. You don't feel rich at $100,000. You feel tired. The account sits there, $94,000, $101,000, bouncing with the market, and you check it the way you check a wound, just to see if it's healing. Nothing about your daily life has changed. You still buy groceries the same way. You still flinch slightly at a $40 dinner. The number is real, but it hasn't touched anything yet. This is the part nobody talks about. The gap between hitting six figures and feeling six figures. Your friends don't know. Your family doesn't know. You haven't told anyone because saying it out loud feels like a different kind of exposure, the kind where people start doing math about you instead of with you. You keep living like you have $40,000 because for years that's what discipline looked like, and discipline is a habit your nervous system doesn't update just because a spreadsheet did. You still buy the store brand. You still hesitate before a $12 lunch, not because you have to, but because the part of your brain that built this number was trained on scarcity, and that training doesn't expire just because the conditions did. There's a strange grief in this stage nobody prepares you for. You expected arrival to feel like relief, and instead it feels like nothing much at all, a flat, quiet absence of the satisfaction you were promised somewhere along the way. But something has shifted underneath you, even if you can't name it yet. You've crossed a threshold most people never reach, and the systems around you, the banks, the advisors, the algorithms that decide what offers land in your inbox, they noticed before you did. And once you start noticing what they noticed, that's when the actual changes begin. There's also a quieter shift happening in how you talk to yourself. You start narrating your own decisions differently, almost defending them before anyone's asked. You tell yourself the store brand is just smart shopping, not leftover scarcity, even when you know, somewhere underneath, that it's both. That's the strange part of this stage. You're not pretending to be poor. You're just still wired for it, and rewiring takes longer than the bank statement does. Stage 2, the system starts watching differently. You don't request anything. You don't apply for anything new. But your bank's app starts showing you a different set of banners. Wealth management starts appearing in places it didn't before. Your credit limit increases without you asking, the algorithm extending you more rope because your balance now tells a story of restraint instead of desperation. You get an email inviting you to a complimentary portfolio review. 6 months ago, this same institution treated you like a maintenance fee waiting to be collected. Now you're a relationship worth cultivating. Nothing about your spending changed. Nothing about your job changed. The only thing that changed is the number sitting behind the scenes, and that number reclassified you in a system you never knew was running. This is the first real lesson of six figures. Money doesn't just buy things. It buys visibility. You become legible to institutions that were structurally blind to you before, and being seen, even by an algorithm, comes with a different set of doors. Some of those doors are useful. Some of them are designed to look useful while quietly extracting more from you than the version of you with $4,000 in savings ever could have lost. The advisor who suddenly wants to meet isn't necessarily wrong for you, but their incentive structure isn't automatically aligned with yours either, and at this stage you don't yet have the vocabulary to tell which offers are genuinely useful and which ones are dressed up to look that way. You start needing to tell the difference. And that skill, telling the difference, is the actual unlock at this stage. Not the money. The discernment the money forces on you. You start reading terms you used to skip, asking questions you used to assume someone else had already answered for you. It's slow, and a little humiliating at first, because you realize how much you were trusting blindly when you had less to protect. Now there's something worth protecting, and protecting it means doing homework nobody assigned you. Stage 3, the psychological tax nobody warns you about. Here's what changes that almost nobody prepares for. Losses start hurting in a new way. When you had $8,000, a 5% market drop cost you $400, annoying, recoverable in a month of normal saving, the kind of number you could mentally absorb before lunch and forget by dinner. At $100,000, that same 5% drop costs you $5,000 in a single afternoon, and your brain does not process that as the market is volatile. Your brain processes it as I worked years for that and it disappeared while I was eating lunch. This is the point where people make their first expensive mistake. They panic sell, not because the strategy was wrong, but because the emotional weight of a six-figure number moving is fundamentally different from a four-figure number moving, even at the identical percentage. Nobody tells you that crossing $100,000 doesn't just change your bank statements. It changes your relationship to fear. You start checking your portfolio more, not less. You start reading financial news you used to ignore, not because you suddenly care about macroeconomics, but because you are now standing close enough to the fire to feel it. This stage either builds you or breaks you. The people who survive it learn to separate the size of the number from the size of the reaction, to remind themselves, almost mechanically, that a percentage is still a percentage no matter how many zeros sit behind the decimal point. The people who don't survive it sell at the bottom, convince themselves the whole thing was a mistake, and spend the next 5 years explaining why they got out, retelling the story in a way that makes the fear sound like wisdom. Nobody warns you that the hardest investing skill isn't picking the right asset. It's sitting still while a real number does something uncomfortable in real time. The number tests you here. It doesn't ask permission. And the test doesn't come once. It comes in waves, every correction, every red week, asking the same question in a slightly different voice. Do you actually believe in the plan, or did you only believe in it when it was easy to believe in? Stage 4. The people around you start changing the conversation. You don't tell anyone the exact figure, but somehow people start treating you slightly differently anyway. Maybe you stopped flinching at the bill when the group splits dinner. Maybe you mentioned, casually, that you maxed out your retirement contribution this year. Small signals leak out even when you try to keep the number sealed. Some friends get quietly competitive, asking pointed questions disguised as curiosity. Some friends get distant, the kind of distance that doesn't announce itself, just shows up as fewer texts and slower replies. And some people, the ones worth keeping, don't change at all, because they were never relating to your bank account in the first place. This is where you learn who actually likes you. It's an ugly lesson and an efficient one. Family dynamics shift too, sometimes in directions you didn't see coming. A relative who never asked you for anything suddenly has a business idea that needs just a small investment. A sibling makes a joke that isn't really a joke about how you must be doing pretty well now. None of this is dramatic. It's not a movie moment. It's small, quiet recalibrations happening across every relationship you have, and you're the only one who knows why. Even your own reactions surprise you. You catch yourself getting defensive when someone makes an offhand comment about money, over-explaining a purchase that needs no explanation, performing a kind of modesty you didn't used to need. The money builds a wall you didn't ask for, transparent, invisible to you most days, but other people seem to bump into it before you do. You start choosing your words more carefully, not out of secrecy exactly, but out of a new awareness that every sentence about money is also a sentence about status, whether you meant it that way or not. Stage 5. You start thinking in systems instead of purchases. Below $100,000, most financial decisions are binary. Buy it or don't. Save it or spend it. Above $100,000, the questions get more complicated, and that complexity is its own kind of pressure. Should this sit in a taxable account or a tax-advantaged one? Should you rebalance now or wait? Should the next $10,000 go toward an index fund, a down payment, or sit liquid in case the job market turns? You start running spreadsheets you never used to run. This is the stage where money stops being a single pile and starts becoming a portfolio, a structure with moving parts that need tending. You're not richer in the way movies depict richer, you're more responsible for more outcomes, and the mental load of that responsibility is heavier than people expect, the quiet tax of decisions that didn't used to exist when the amount at stake was small enough to absorb a mistake without consequence. You start optimizing in places you never thought you'd care about, fee percentages, tax brackets, contribution limits, because at this size, a 1% difference is no longer a rounding error. It's real money, every single year, compounding while you sleep. You start reading the fine print on accounts you opened years ago and never looked at again, finding fees you'd been quietly paying without noticing, the kind of small leak that didn't matter at $4,000 and matters quite a bit now. You start to understand, maybe for the first time, that managing money well isn't really about discipline anymore. It's about attention. The discipline got you here. The attention is what keeps you here and moves you forward. Stage 6. The comparison trap gets sharper, not softer. You'd think hitting $100,000 would feel like an arrival. Instead, it recalibrates your sense of what enough means. You start seeing people with $500,000, with $2 million, and the goalpost, which used to feel impossibly far away, now feels like the next obvious target. Each level you reach doesn't bring contentment. It brings a clearer view of the next level, and that view can quietly poison the satisfaction you should be feeling right now. You catch yourself comparing your 6 figures to someone else's 7, forgetting that you would have killed for this exact number 3 years ago. Some people learn to manage this. Others get trapped in a permanent state of always optimizing, never arriving, treating every milestone as a pit stop instead of a destination. When you had nothing, Comparison was abstract, almost theoretical. Now it has a target, and that specificity is exactly what makes it sting more than it used to. The strange irony is that the only reliable cure for this isn't earning more. It's looking backward instead of sideways, measuring against the version of you that had nothing instead of the stranger online who has more, because sideways comparison has no finish line and backward comparison actually tells you the truth about how far you've come. Stage 7, the real shift is invisible to everyone but you. The biggest change after $100,000 isn't lifestyle. It's identity. You start seeing yourself as someone capable of building wealth, not just someone hoping to. You negotiate differently at work because you have a cushion now, and cushions create leverage. You take calculated risks you wouldn't have touched before because losing doesn't mean catastrophe anymore. It means a setback, recoverable, survivable. This is the actual unlock of 6 figures, not the number, the proof. Proof that the system you built actually works, compounding quietly while you weren't watching closely enough to notice. Most people quit at $8,000, at $20,000, right before the curve starts bending in their favor. You didn't. And once you've watched a number compound once, you can't unknow what that looks like. It changes how you talk about the future, less hoping, more planning, because hope was the language of someone who didn't yet have evidence, and now you do. Stage 8. What happens from here is a choice, not a default. One path is comfort, settling into the relief of having arrived somewhere most people never reach, easing the vigilance, letting the system run quietly in the background while you enjoy the breathing room you've earned. The other is acceleration, using this base as a launching point because the next 100,000 will compound faster than the first, arriving not through more discipline but through the structure already in motion. The system doesn't care which you choose. It will keep compounding either way, indifferent to your intentions, responsive only to the inputs you give it. But you now know something most people never learn experientially, only theoretically, the difference between reading about compounding and feeling it happen to your own money while you weren't paying attention. That knowledge multiplies if you don't stop here. It sits quietly behind every decision you make from this point forward, whether you notice it or not, the same way the banks noticed before you did.